Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar. With consumers across the globe facing a major cost of living crisis, we're going to focus today on the state of financial literacy and well-being in the United States and where American trust in financial institutions is now and how that has changed. But before we dive in, allow us to quickly introduce ourselves. My name is Tyler, and I'm a senior trends analyst. I'm also joined by my colleague, Jack, who is a trends analyst. We are both based in GWI's New York office.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Before we get into our webinar today, for anyone who might not know who we are, GWI is a target audience company, and we provide consumer insights to leading brands, marketing agencies, and media organizations worldwide.
GWI uses audience insights to answer the questions every business has about its customers. And we're powered by consistent data that represents the views of 2.7 billion people in 50 countries. Our platform is an on-demand window into their world, painting a picture of what people everywhere think, feel, and do.
We've got the world's largest panel of respondents, with over 22 million panelists in 50 countries, conducting over 1 million interviews every year. So it's safe to say we've got a pretty well-rounded view of a global audiences. But as we've mentioned, today we're not focused on global trends. We're narrowing the lens on the US market, and we have a data set that empowers us to do just that. Our GWI USA dataset covers all 50 states, and the survey has a quarterly sample of 20,000, which equates to roughly 240 million connected consumers annually. Our unique USA study allows us to really tap into the US consumer across a wide range of demographic backgrounds.
Now that you know who we are, let's get into it. We'll start with overall feelings on the economy and how that impacts everyday Americans.
We can start, though, to understand the state of US finances by understanding how Americans are feeling about the future of the economy. As you can see here, this chart shows that half of Americans believe that the economy will decline in the coming months, which is up from 37% last year. It's no wonder there's a bleak outlook from consumers, as economists continue to signal the warning signs via raising interest rates used to fight inflation. 77% of Americans are feeling more price conscious about grocery prices in the past 3 months. Despite this, half of Americans currently feel financially secure. Alongside economic and financial concerns, job growth has been relatively consistent throughout 2022. However, as consumers are feeling uncertain about the future of the economy and their personal finances, many are expecting a recession and subsequent layoffs. We've seen both large and small businesses lay off a large portion of their employees. These concerns are in the back of all Americans' minds when they are considering budgeting and spending habits going into 2023.
And not only is it affecting their outlook on the US economy as a whole and their own personal finances, it's also impacting their confidence in managing money. 47% of US consumers say they're good at managing money. While you may think that this number isn't so bad, it is an 8% decrease from Q2 of 2021. With the cost of living crisis and a looming recession, it's no surprise that they're losing confidence in their ability to get by. Consumers are also making up for lost time from the pandemic. They're reallocating their budgets, and at times, if you're like me, breaking their budgets to travel, go to concerts, and attend sporting events. Spending money on things you weren't able to do in 2020 feels good now, but it's definitely an area to be careful with when it comes to managing money. With all these factors at play, Americans need to start prioritizing budgeting, saving, and paying off any debts to stay above whatever the economy is going to throw at them.
And when it comes to a monthly budget, Americans are doing pretty well. Even if only rarely, 94% of Americans are following a budget. And of those budgeters, only 4% always go over their budgets, with a majority only sometimes not meeting their budgeting goals. According to the Consumer Price Index from the US Bureau of Labor Statistics, the cost of food and energy has gone up double digits percentage-wise over the past year. Our data also points out that over 7 in 10 US consumers say their cost of living has increased from 3 years ago. This just points to how well Americans have been doing at staying in the lines of their budget. But there is still room for improvement.
Like budgeting, saving has also become an essential practice for American consumers. A vast majority of Americans save, but levels exist within this pool of savers. 33% of consumers hit their savings goals, but over half aren't saving as much as they want to. Unplanned impulse purchases and the rapidly rising cost of essential goods and services may be at play here, as budgets are stretched and broken due to the rising cost of goods. Americans fare pretty well in saving for emergencies too. A majority have enough saved up to cover the basic expenses for 3 or more months. However, around 1 in 5 Americans don't have enough savings to even cover for 1 month. As we showed you earlier, most Americans aren't expecting the economy or their personal financial situation to improve anytime soon, so many are looking to improve their savings approach in the next 3 months. Budgeting and saving are two facets of financial management, and debt is another. While ability to pay off debt is correlated with income level, debt status is not. Across our 3 income groups, around 1 in 3 consumers do not have debt. But the higher their income, the less likely they are to have unmanageable debt. Debt can be attitudinal as well. On the most right-hand chart here, we see that nearly 4 in 10 of those who describe themselves as good money managers have no debts.
Young consumers have a unique debt that many of their older counterparts don't have: student loan payments. About 1 in 5 Gen Zs and millennials have student loans. Although these have been on a debt moratorium since the beginning of COVID, and the legality of the Biden partial forgiveness is still up in the air, once repayments start, young consumers may need to reallocate their budgets to start paying this debt back.
Now that we've covered where Americans are in terms of some of the financial building blocks, let's see how they fare in the overall picture of financial literacy. Using GWI Zeitgeist, our monthly survey with different topics each month, we created 3 segments: advanced, amateur, and novice, based on financial practices such as budgeting, savings, debt level, credit knowledge, and retirement planning.
Looking at the first 2 bars on the left, we see that Americans are behind other markets when it comes to financial understanding. Half of US consumers are considered novices, indicating a need for improvement. While you may expect a generation to play a role here, it really doesn't. In fact, looking at the middle charts, more Gen X's and baby boomers than Gen Z's and millennials are considered novices. With all the financial tools, tips, and apps available, younger generations are using more resources and seeking help. And this could be a reason for the disparity.
Income, however, does play a factor in what literacy levels look like. Looking at the bars on the right, high earners are much better off. High earners have greater ability to pay down debts, save more money, and likely have retirement strategies in place. They also have access to credit cards with favorable interest rates, cutting down on the added credit card debt. Meanwhile, 2 in 3 low earners are considered novices. For things that enable high earners to have good financial health, we see the opposite for low earners. Low income means budgets that can't recover from unforeseen circumstances, little to no retirement savings, and low savings amounts in general. 75% of Americans want banks to help with their customers' financial well-being, and considering the low scores of Americans now, banks are an obvious partner to improve this, and outreach is needed. With ample fintech tools and apps, there are plenty of industry disruptors that would love to provide the help that US consumers desire.
But if you're looking for a weakness in Americans' financial understanding, it isn't credit scores. 93% of Americans know what a credit score is. Even the demographic with the lowest knowledge of credit scores, Gen Zs and millennials, still have a very high understanding. Older consumers are some of the likeliest to know what a credit score is, likely because they were already making financial decisions for themselves and their household, or coming to that age when credit scores were introduced in 1989. When Gen Z fully matures to that age point, we expect this number to be as high as the 95% figure their older counterparts have.
And as you can see in this chart, there are gaps in age, income, and financial literacy level. An overarching reason for these disparities is credit card ownership. Young consumers, low earners, and novices are all less likely to own a credit card. Now, it's hard to qualify for cards with a lack of credit history. And with new technology like buy now, pay later that allows for multiple payments without interest via a debit card or bank account, some consumers may delay entering the credit market. Now, let's take a look at the future. Retirement savings are something that even the youngest of employees are familiar with, especially with the introduction of the employer sponsored 401k model in 1978. Looking at the overall picture, 75% are saving for retirement, but there's more that don't have a plan compared to those that do. For many consumers under the age of 45, retirement is still far off in the future, so they may not have a set plan yet, even if they are making contributions to a 401k or other retirement fund. Older consumers are a bit different, as retirement is closer in their future, and they like to get their finances exactly right.
Income is also a big factor. As we see here, over half of high earners have a plan in place, a stark contrast to the 18% figure for low earners. High earners obviously have more funds to put to retirement instead of everyday life, and are more likely to have employer-sponsored retirement plans and pension plans in place. Higher earners are also more likely to think about saving for retirement earlier in life. Nearly 75% think that retirement savings should start under the age of 29, the highest out of all our income groups. Income may play a bigger factor in how much one saves for retirement, but saving for retirement early is always a good practice, and one that all consumers should be made aware of.
Moving on, the question is how can we address this literacy gap so that more Americans have a better grip on their finances in this tough environment? A trusted partner is needed to help bridge this gap, and it's banks that are primed to do so. 75% of Americans think that banks should provide support for their customers' financial well being, making this a very popular sentiment. When asked if their bank provides that support to them, less than 50% felt helped. This is a massive disparity, and one the banking industry should be both concerned about and optimistic for the opportunity at hand. We'll talk about trust Americans have towards banks and financial institutions later on, but spoiler alert, it's among the highest of all institutions. With consumers trusting banks and wanting help from them, it's time for banks to step up. There are many ways to address this, but let's start with who to help, what to help with, and how to go about that.
Let's start with the who and the what. For all the categories listed here, it's younger consumers who are looking to banks for help. They're more likely to list banks as a resource in which to seek financial advice compared to older consumers, and it shows here. Retirement is the number one area that consumers want help with. As we remember from a few slides ago, many Americans don't have a set retirement plan, and because starting retirement savings early is a widely accepted personal financial sentiment, it's no surprise young consumers would like a head start. While Gen Zs and millennials are more likely to seek advice in everything listed here, they especially stand out in seeking out budgeting and spending habits advice. With the price of goods shooting up from last year, it's no surprise that younger consumers are seeking out advice on a core building block of finance management, like budgeting.
Now, how should banks go about giving out this advice? While one-on-one sessions with a financial advisor are preferred by older generations, it's not the most favored by young consumers. They prefer online finance courses and automatic saving and investing tools. They see online courses as a good way to seek financial advice, and it certainly has its advantages. These courses can be done at their own pace, accommodate any schedule, and can be done from the comfort of home. Courses can vary in detail, but consumers are sure to learn about all aspects of financial management in pretty decent detail.
Younger generations also prefer automatic saving and investing tools over other means of financial education from their banks. These consumers have grown up in a world with technology that rapidly increases in capabilities every year. And much technology today is focused on automation. These tools take much of the decision-making away in favor of automation, cutting down on the stress the user has to face. Tools like Simplify and Mint are popular and help consumers reach their financial goals. While these tools may not have the personal touch of a financial advisor, they do give users a quick and detailed overview on their finances, all whenever they wish to use the tool. To brand build for the future, banks should consider partnering with existing tools or build their own, and offering financial courses online. Younger consumers are seeking out any advice, and by offering the educational means they prefer, this could bode well for the future.
Mobile apps that track spending are also helpful tools for consumers. However, there is room for growth as they have been on a slight upward trend in the last 2 quarters, but remain overall stagnant in the last 2 years. But this comes at a time when Americans are on their phones more than ever. The average American spends over 3 hours on their mobile device a day, and Gen Zs and millennials spend over 4 hours. Financial tracking apps can and should benefit greatly from increased mobile phone usage if they can build an appealing and simple tool to use. Certain groups are using a spending tracking app more so than the average consumer. Gig economy workers, for example, make good use of these apps. Their multiple streams of income can make tracking spending complicated, but these apps give a good overview of what their spending is like. These apps are also appealing to consumers who are confident in learning new tech and consumers who are dependent on their phones. Both skew on the younger side, and with technology and mobile phone usage rapidly increasing every year, these spending tracking apps may pick up more traction. Banks have a lot of potential to be trusted partners for young consumers who are desperately looking for guidance as they try to navigate the tough world of personal finance. Now that banking has gone online, there are new potential opportunities unlocked.
As fintech apps have increased in popularity, we've also seen changes in consumer habits. Most notably, we've seen across-the-board increases in the use of mobile payment and online banking services. In recent years, the increase in availability of online payment and banking services has allowed any user to do all of their banking and payments on their phone or computer. Banks and financial institutions have been successful in producing widespread adoption of their online services. As you can see on the chart, mobile banking has become very popular across all generations, and a large majority of Americans use these services at least once a week. Similar to other trends we've looked at, there are significant generational differences when it comes to the usage rates of online banking. For example, Gen Z and millennials are the heaviest users of online banking services. They both have the need for quick access to finances and a higher familiarity with technology.
Mobile payment services used to exchange money between businesses and individuals are much more popular among Gen Zs and millennials, seeing 46% and 47% of these age cohorts, respectively. Having money available quickly and easily allows for new types of transactions that can give consumers new approaches to money management. From splitting a bill at a restaurant to paying rent, these services are changing how consumers interact with their own finances. It's fair to say that these services will only increase in popularity in the coming years.
Daily use of online banking has held level across older generations, indicating that increased adoption for this cohort may be difficult for banks to achieve. For example, 20% of baby boomers use online banking daily today, but they are still less likely to use it than the average consumer. On the other hand, millennials have seen the largest increase in online banking use, rising slightly since Q3 2021. Compared to the US average, millennials are much more likely to track their spending, but brands should consider why other generations are not seeing a similar increase in usage.
Banks can help draw consumers into their platforms with new uses and more functions, but the focus should be to tailor their services for consumers, especially between generations. Overall, banks and financial institutions should continue to focus on making easy to use and effective online banking platforms. Making better use of platforms can lead to more engagement and can help consumers understand and also trust the banks that they are working with on a near daily basis. This chart shows just how popular mobile payment services have become, with over half of Americans using PayPal at least once a month. Overall, we see a 9% increase in daily usage since Q1 2021, of these services. This is in part because more vendors are accepting these services as payment now, along with the increase in usage among individuals. PayPal, Venmo, and Cash App have also introduced the ability to buy and sell cryptocurrency in their apps. Mobile payment services are moving away from being just apps used to transfer cash between friends and are becoming robust financial apps with a lot to offer. It's reasonable to expect mobile payment services to continue to increase in popularity as more features appear and more retailers are willing to accept them as payment.
Payment services have increased accessibility of using digital payments so that any business or consumer with a phone can make use of more payment methods than ever before. However, brands may consider approaches that make these payment services more appealing to older consumers, who have significantly lower usage rates than younger ones. The most popular payment service, PayPal, is used half as much by baby boomers compared to the average American. Older consumers who are more familiar with traditional payment methods may not see the need to start using services like PayPal or Cash App. Even though these services offer a product that appeals to a wide range of consumers, brands may want to consider creating payment service products that have a direct appeal to these consumers. Services that are created to suit specific identities, such as Daylight, a mobile banking service tailored to the LGBTQ+ community, is an example of how this can be executed. Higher levels of adoption could also be achieved in the mobile payment sector if brands are able to make similar appeals. Having high levels of consumer trust is especially critical for banks and financial institutions. So let's look at some ways banks can build and maintain trust.
Banks and financial institutions are still the most trusted organizations in the United States, despite rising economic concerns. Their trust only decreased 5% in the past year, and 86% of Americans still have at least a little trust in banks and financial institutions. This very high level of trust compared to some other organizations may indicate that even through difficult economic times, people still trust their banks to help manage finances and keep their money safe. Banks are viewed as reliable and secure because of the reputation they have built, which is of course necessary due to the importance of the services that banks offer.
Lack of trust in the government is a much larger concern, especially when it comes to managing the economy. Banks are not viewed as being primarily responsible for overall economic changes, and as a result, have not lost trust, while the government has taken most of the blame for rising inflation and other economic factors. We've seen this impact government trust in a pretty significant way, and 39% of Americans report not trusting the government, which is a 14% increase since Q3 of 2021. Earning consumer trust is a difficult task, and brands need to make a lot of considerations when looking to improve their trust levels among consumers. Providing clear and easy to understand resources is a key way for banks to earn more trust from consumers. When it comes to where Americans will look for financial advice, only 3 in 10 consumers would trust banks. While it comes as no surprise that certified financial advisors are the top source for Americans, family, friends, or peers rank above banks. Among millennials, friends, family, or peers becomes the top source of financial advice, and they are more likely to trust these sources than the average American. The financial outlook may be uncertain for Americans, but banks may still be seen as simply places to hold money and investments, as opposed to sources of information. And as 1 in 5 Americans look to websites or blog posts for financial advice, to change this perception, banks could look to the growing community of online financial advisors to seek inspiration on how to improve their services and build trust.
Americans don't have relationships with banks that lead to them putting trust in banks for making financial decisions. Banks could tackle this with more in-app tools and software to help customers with decisions about saving and investing. And because banks already have a relatively high level of trust, these types of services may become popular with many. Banks may not be a popular source of financial advice, but they are still used as a tool to learn about finances, especially among Gen Zs and millennials, who are 41% more likely to use them than the average American. Banks have been effective at creating teaching tools for consumers, but need to build out more services if they want to be a top source that Americans use for financial advice.
Although trust in general is quite high for banks and financial institutions, there are some discrepancies in trust across generations, highlighting the fact that different approaches are needed to effectively appeal to different audiences. While baby boomers are much more likely to trust than not trust, younger generations are more likely to not trust than older ones. Younger generations have not had as much interaction with these institutions, and thus lack the confidence that older generations have built over the years.
Although Gen Zs are tied for most likely to flat out distrust banks and financial institutions, they're also second most likely to trust banks and financial institutions completely. Gen Zs have more limited experience with banks and financial institutions than other generations. This results in a bit of a bipolar relationship. Some trust completely and some don't trust at all. Creating new apps and products that appeal to Gen Zs can help build out trust and lead to higher usage rates and trust levels among this generation. Younger generations also have different factors that shape how they view and trust the company compared to older generations. For example, younger gens are more likely to consider how a company treats its employees when they are deciding whether or not to trust an organization. Banks and financial institutions need to consider a holistic approach when building trust among consumers.
One of the key components that brands can use to help foster trust among consumers is that Americans want to better understand what happens to their data when they are giving up permissions to a company. When consumers are asked what would help increase their trust in a company, a clear understanding of how their data is used is the top influence for an organization. With the security of their data top of mind, because of the many large data breaches that have happened in recent years, many brands should continue to promote explanations of how they use and protect consumers' data. When consumers perceive brands as more trustworthy, they are more willing to engage with brands and make purchases with them.
Financial services have the second most trust behind healthcare for data privacy concerns, with 32% of Americans trusting them the most for data and privacy. This industry has been successful in creating a high level of trust for consumers, which is essential because of the sensitive and crucial data financial services use on a daily basis. Younger generations are 20% more likely than older generations to say that asking for information relevant to company products would increase their trust in a company when it comes to sharing personal data. Now, we've reviewed a lot of information here, but let's review some of our key takeaways. First, Americans are managing finances fine, but there is room for improvement. They budget well, save money, and pay off their debts. But with the cost of living through the roof, these aspects and others have started to slip. They especially need guidance on retirement and will also welcome advice relating to budgeting, spending, and saving money. They have plenty of tools that help them do this, but they need a trusted partner, and that's where banks come in. Banks have the biggest opportunity to be trusted financial advice partners. Most are looking to banks for help, but not as many feel they get that help. They can fill in this trust gap by offering advice about retirement, budgeting, and savings. They should adopt more modern ways of education, like online finance courses and automatic investing and savings tools.
Mobile payment services are more popular than ever before, and these services are only increasing in popularity as they offer a wider range of services and have become accepted at more vendors. In general, these services are widely used. However, older generations do not make use of mobile payments as frequently as younger ones. To address this differential, brands may want to consider creating mobile payment options that have unique appeals to older consumers. And as I mentioned before, transparency is a critical component of consumer trust. People want to know how their data is used and how it's protected. Banks can ensure that they keep their high levels of trust by providing easy to understand resources around how they use and protect their customers' data. Additionally, wider issues such as treatment of employees play into how consumers perceive organizations especially for younger generations. It's important that banks keep this in mind when they are seeking to maintain and build out trust among new consumers.
So that's all from us today. Thank you very much for listening. If you have any questions about what you've seen today, or you'd like more information about what we do here at GWI, please don't hesitate to reach out to us on the email address on the screen. We have a host of free content available on our site, so if you enjoyed what you've heard today, head over right now to gwi.com and click on the Resources tab to find out more. We'll be sending you the recording and slides from this webinar, so you can look over today's content in your own time. Once again, thanks everybody.